its own communities where you can post your resume. You can post it there. Let's talk. Let's go back a little bit and talk a little bit more about resumes. Um, Resumes are extremely challenging to do because, on the one hand, you want to be specific to the skills that you have in the industry that you're working in. But if you're too specific, then you are blanking out a lot of people. The resumes that we post now, more often than not, I don't know what the percentage is, but I know it's a very high percentage. When you answer an ad online for a job and you upload your resume is initially scanned through a human resources software program. And what they're looking for are specific words. So the human resource department creates the job description for the job that has the vacancy. And then there's all the keywords that they're looking for in that position. So what the computer does, that software program, it looks at your resume and then it compares it to the job description and it finds how many matches there are. And then it'll spit out and say, this is a good candidate, you know. So no one is even looking at your resume. So in that regard, formatting is not critical because you just need to make it as simple as possible, because if you do fancy stuff, then the software is not going to recognize it and it spits it out. So I highly recommend doing a search online on how to write a resume, and it'll tell you specifically what fonts to use. What else? And it's not complicated, but it's very simple steps that are easy to follow that will get your resume looked at. And then once you get past that, like if you do get into the point where you're going in for an interview, then you can zhuzh up your resume, make it fancy, stick out, so that when you go in for your interview, your resume will pop because that person interviewing you has already seen so many different people and you want to stand out as much as possible. So resumes are really critical. So please get help with that. If you don't have the funds, there's a lot of free information on the internet that can really, really help. Just spend time on your resume. Make it look good. You don't want to put too much information and you don't want to put too little. And so there's kind of like a dance that you have to do. And then one last thing I want to say about that is if there's a specific job that you find that you want, let's say you're doing a search on Indeed and you are looking for an administrative assistant position and you see a post and you're like, oh my gosh, I would love to work for this company. This is my dream company that I want to work for. What I recommend is take that job description and use the same exact words that are in that job description and put them on your resume. And that way you're sure you have a better chance of making it through the software program and then onto the hiring manager's desk. And a little bit about that. So basically the resume goes through the human resource department. It is determined by the software or the person that is reviewing all these resumes who has enough skills and qualifications to go through to meet with the hiring manager. The hiring manager is the person that's going to be your boss. And so once if 1,000 people apply for the same job and the computer says, okay, these 50 or these 200 or whatever, however they determine whatever it is that they want to do. Um, then those resumes, those 50 resumes, let's say, get put on that hiring manager's desk. And then the hiring manager looks through those 50 and then determines from those resumes who they want to meet. Then they whittle it down from, let's say, 50 to 25. And then those 25 people are the ones that are going to be called to say, hi, we would like to schedule you for an interview, so on and so forth. Okay, so next I want to talk about your finances. So you just lost your job, and so you're now cut off from that receiving that regular paycheck, or if you don't get regular paychecks, however you're used to receiving money for the job that you do is now gone. So what I recommend with that is, the first thing that I do is I figure out where I am financially. And I'm going to admit it, I am not a financial genius by any means. And so I don't want to tell you something that I do that might not work for you. But, these are just kind of really, really basic things that I think, would apply to anybody. So what I typically do is I look and see how much money I have in my checking account, how much money I have in my savings account, how much money I have in my retirement account for emergencies. And then I look at my budget. Every month I have a list of all of my expenses. And then I have the income. And then that's what I figure out how I figure out how much money I have. So based on your budget, what expenses are going to be coming. And if you don't have a budget, then go online and look at your last 3 months of your bank statements, and do a spreadsheet, whether on the computer or on a piece of paper, if that's what you're more comfortable with. And then literally just write down everything. How much you spent on gas, how much you spent on food, how much you spent on electricity, cell phone, gas if you have a gas bill, mortgage or rent, all of your expenses, and then look at what you're spending every single month on those expenses. Some of your expenses are the same every single month, some of them fluctuate. So you need to look at all the money that you're going to be spending. And now you have to figure out, okay, this is how much money I need to live on. Do I have that money or not? And unfortunately, during these times, most people don't have savings. They don't have investment accounts. They don't have friends or family that they can rely on for help, financial help. And that's where things get really, really scary. And very depressing. So once you know what your financial situation is, it gives you power, it gives you strength, and you're able to make some major decisions based on how bleak your situation is. There have been times where I've had to move and go live with my sister or a friend, rent a room from a friend when I couldn't afford my rent. And that's just the decision I had to make. So everybody's situations are different. And if you don't look at your financial situation, if you don't know what your financial situation is, then you're just going blind. And then what ends up happening is more bad things start to happen that amplify how bad you're feeling in the first place, right? So if all of a sudden you're stressed out because you've lost your job, and then all of a sudden your internet goes out because you haven't paid the bill, you can't pay the bill. Now you've got that pressure on top of the stress that you have for losing your job. And all of that is just weight. that's on your shoulders, that keeps you up at night, that stresses you out even more than necessary. So it's really, really important to know, bad or good, what your financial situation is. And if you want more information about that, I can talk to you on an individual level. I personally have a lot of resources because I've been in this situation so many times that I've developed a lot of resources for getting help. If you're in a situation where your finances are very bleak, you're looking at your unemployment check and you're like, there's no way I'm going to be able to make rent. I don't know how I'm going to pay the rent. It's really, really important to tell your landlord what's going on if you're renting. And even if you have a mortgage, it's really important to communicate with your mortgage lender and let them know what's going on. There are so many programs out there that we are not aware of that they are, because they see the situation so many times. Recently I went into my renter's office where I rent my apartment, and I was just completely honest with them. I said, I have not found a job yet, and I don't have enough money for rent for next month. So if I don't find a job soon, I'm going to have to move. And she told me about a program. She's like, oh yeah, I call these people. They've been helping a lot of people with their rent. So, and I never knew about that. And it was just another wonderful resource that I wasn't aware of. But she told me in the office that, they get people all the time and they help people all the time. Okay, let's move on to the next thing here. So I do want to talk about this. It is really important, although maybe for you, you're thinking, yeah, right. It's exercise and volunteer. And I kind of group those together, but you can do whatever you want. The main idea with this is that once you lose your job, it's really, really easy to get severely depressed. And when that happens to me, I start to pull away from everybody and kind of become a hermit. Number one, because, it hurts me to have my friends worry about me, things like that. And two, I think it's just it just happens. I think it depends on your personality. Everybody is different. But for me, I tend to withdraw from everything and everyone. And that's not a good thing. So I highly recommend, even if you've never exercised before, when you did have a job, please take 30 minutes out of every day and walk, go outside, stand, run, whatever. Just be outside. The sun gives us vitamin D, and we all need that. And a lot of us are deficient in vitamin D. And that's the easiest way to get your vitamin D is to go stand outside for 15 minutes. And of course, use your sunscreen and all that good stuff. If that doesn't appeal to you, then I encourage you to volunteer. And that sounds a lot easier than it actually is, because in order to volunteer, you have to fill out applications, you have to, put in a lot of time to get to the point where you're ready to help. And that obviously takes time away from your job search. But it is really important to volunteer. Service is truly the way to bring true joy into your life and happiness. And me personally, when I volunteer, I know that I'm helping people that are in a lot worse